Seems like every week. Oh, thank you, Don. Yeah, I know. Gail always claps for the handsome people. I like that about Gail. Every week that I've been preaching lately, it seems like we're discussing a topic of Scripture, a section of Scripture that brings about a different image of who Jesus is. And I love that. This section that we're going into today is the next section of Luke 11, the end of this chapter. Luke 11, 37 through 54. The notes are on your outline you can find on the app if you'd like to follow along with it. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. I did not put that in the notes, but New Living is what I'll be reading from. And this section brings about the image of Jesus that's different than what we typically think of with him, once again. And what we typically think of is the guy driving a Prius with the coexist sticker on the back, right? You know, that just loving everybody, easygoing, a weakness as well in there kind of thing, you know? And it's the guy that when you're driving up, dropping your kids off at school in the car line, they park right up at the front and they get out, they get the kids out of the car, they get the backpacks on, the coats on, they give them a little hug, they're talking to everybody that's sitting out there, right? And you are trying to save space for everybody, so you're up too close, you can't get around them. Meanwhile, you've actually prepared your kids for school, and they're ready to just get out of the car and take off, right? I got off track with that. The coexist guy, just loving everybody. Loving everybody. One of my pet peeves came out of there, I guess. But that's this image of Jesus. This is not what we see here in this section. I love this section because Jesus comes in and he's invited to have dinner with the Pharisees and the teachers of the religious law at a Pharisee's home. He comes in, and inviting someone into your home for dinner or a meal was an element of worship for them. So this is a big deal that Jesus is invited here. He comes in, and he doesn't follow the ceremonies that they always did. He didn't follow the hand-washing ceremony, which was something that was in the religious law that they would have to do. It's something they added into what the Lord said. And so they added that in. He did not do that. He just sat down. Anybody see the movie Thor? When he was new to earth and just sat down at the cafe and downed his drink and then smashed his glass on the floor and said, "Another!" Right? This is more of the image of Jesus in here. He comes in, he sits down at the table, ignoring their customs, and then just smashes truth. He comes in and throws the truth down, doesn't destroy it, he throws the truth down. And he brings in and he's cursing them. He's not cursing at them, but he is cursing them. Woe to you. Sorrow to you, and then showing specifics for why they will have sorrow. He's pointing out all of these bad things about them and going into detail, and these are the people that have the authority to kill him. They were under Roman rule at this time, and the Romans gave the authority to the religious leaders, the Jewish leaders, to follow their laws, to enforce their laws, to carry out judgment for their laws. And so, these were the people that had authority to kill Jesus. And so he comes in, insults them, throws down some truth, and then gets up and leaves. I love that. He just gets up and leaves, and as he's leaving, they're all trying to get him to say something that they can attack. Afterwards, in Mark 15, it says this, not in the Luke version, but this story is told in 3 of the Gospels. And in Matthew's version, actually, in Matthew 15, the disciples came to him and say, "Do you realize what just happened?" And he says, "Yes, this is what happened." And then they said, "Okay, can you explain it to me?" So this is his explanation of the section we're going to read in just a second. Peter said to Jesus, "Explain to us what that means." And Jesus said, "Do you not understand yet? Anything you eat passes through the stomach and goes into the sewer, but the words you speak come from the heart. That's what defiles you. These things are what defiles you." He had a little list there. "Eating with unwashed hands will never defile you." Defiling is a big deal for them. Defiling you means that you are unclean. And there is a ton of ways that you could be unclean, and we'll get into a couple of those in a minute. But unclean means you can't go worship. You can't go interact with God. You can't go into the temple if you are unclean. And so what Jesus is saying, as he always did, he took an outward expression and brought it into the heart. And he said, your heart, what's in your heart is really what makes you unclean, what makes your soul unclean. It's not what's on the outside. And so that's what's happening here. So let's read from Luke 11, this section. As Jesus was speaking, one of the Pharisees invited him home for a meal. So he went in and took his place at the table. His host was amazed to see that he sat down to eat without first performing the hand-washing ceremony required by Jewish custom. This custom was you had to pour water over your hand this way, you had to rub it together a certain way, and then rub it out. It didn't actually even clean your hands, but it was just a ceremonial custom. Then the Lord said to him, "You Pharisees are so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are filthy, full of greed and wickedness. Fools." I love the exclamation points there too. Fools. Didn't God make the inside as well as the outside? So clean the inside by giving gifts to the poor, and you will be clean all over. What sorrow awaits you, Pharisees? And this "what sorrow" phrase is going to come up over and over again through this section. And this sorrow this is the curse that he's saying. He says, woe to you. He's actually cursing them here. Woe to you, Pharisees, for you are careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore justice and the love of God. You should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things. What sorrow awaits you, Pharisees, for you love to sit in the seats of honor in the synagogues and receive respectful greetings as you walk in the marketplaces. Yet, what sorrow awaits you? For you are like hidden graves in a field. People walk over them without knowing the corruption they are stepping on. Teacher, said an expert in religious law, you have insulted us too in what you just said. I love that statement. He's like, all right, you can insult the Pharisees, but wait a minute. Wait, you also insulted us. Stop for a second. Yes, Jesus said, what sorrow also awaits you experts in religious law, for you crush people with unbearable religious demands, and you never lift a finger to ease the burden. What sorrow awaits you? For you build monuments for the prophets your own ancestors killed long ago. But in fact, you stand as witnesses who agree with what your ancestors did. They killed the prophets, and you join in their crime by building the monuments. This is what God in his wisdom said about you. He's quoting the Old Testament here. I will send prophets and apostles to them, but they will kill some and persecute the others. As a result, this generation will be held responsible for the murder of all God's prophets from the creation of the world, from the murder of Abel to the murder of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and sanctuary. Yes, it will be certainly charged against this generation. What sorrow awaits you experts in religious law, for you remove the key to knowledge from the people. You don't enter the kingdom yourselves, and you prevent others from entering. As Jesus was leaving, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees became hostile and tried to provoke him with many questions. They wanted to trap him into saying something they could use against him. They were trying to kill him. They were trying to trap him into saying something that they could go kill him. So often, we allow religion to get in the way of really experiencing Jesus. And that's what he's talking about here. We let religion get in the way of experiencing Jesus. Religion being the rules and the regulations that we have to follow to please God or to worship him. But what Jesus always did was he brought the external expressions to a heart level. He said, you've heard it said, don't murder. He's quoting the 10 Commandments. Don't murder. And yet I say, don't even get angry at people. He said, you've heard it said to not commit adultery, and yet I say, don't even look at somebody with lust in your eye. Right? He brings it to the heart. The point of the kingdom of God here, the point of what Jesus is saying is it's not about just restricting your actions. It's about really letting Jesus transform what's in your heart and being therefore free to live out what's in your heart. These guys had hate in their heart, and yet they put on all these restrictions so that they didn't show that to anyone in the world. And what Jesus is bringing is freedom, true freedom to really live out what's inside of us. Because as we let Jesus transform our heart, our heart is changed, and we are able now to express that and be free in it, because what we're expressing is the love of Jesus. So, let's keep going on here. This says what sorrow awaits you over and over again. And we have to realize, first of all, going into this, that what Jesus is talking about is really love and grace. And he's fighting. Out of love, he's fighting for grace here. Grace, this whole section has to be looked at through the eyes of grace. Otherwise, we can see harshness in it. And yes, there's harshness towards what the Pharisees are bringing, because what they're bringing is clouding people's view of really God's love and God's grace. And so he's fighting for grace here. If we look at the points, the first point, let's go kind of section by section through this. There's 4 sections in particular I'd like to point out that I think are impactful for today. The first one is that our actions should be an outpouring of our heart. That's the beginning point here that Jesus was saying. He said, "What sorrow awaits you, Pharisees, for you are careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore justice and the love of God. You should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things." Now, the Pharisees were very detailed and intense about their tithing. There was even this section in their law that said that you didn't have to tithe off of certain herbs. There are certain things that are just used for tea. You don't have to tithe those. It's like if you go to a meal with somebody. We all have that friend. I have one in the room right now, I'm not going to point out, that always forgets to bring their wallet to a meal, right? And then you pay for them, and later on they Venmo you or something, and then having to tithe off of that Venmo money you get, right? You don't have to do that. And that's the kind of thing they would do. They would say, every bit of money I would get, I would then tithe off of. And so they were taking it to an extreme to earn God's love, to be right with him, to not be defiled. They were going the extra mile to show how great they were, and even tithing off of those herbs in the garden is what he's saying here. But he's pointing out, you do all of these little details of law, but you neglect the actual important things, the justice, the love of God. You're neglecting that. Yesterday, we went to a farmer's market, and as we were walking by, there was somebody who was trying to get everyone to sign a political thing. I don't remember what that's called right now, but they were having us sign a petition. That's what it is. Having us sign a petition, and there was a lady in front of us. We could see this dude over here. And you know what they're up to when you see them, right? And so there's a lady walking in front of us, and he said something to her, and you could tell she didn't understand what he was actually asking. And so she stopped and got more information from him, and we then walked past. And we could hear the interaction, and we heard her be obviously very opposed to what he's trying to get her to sign up for, and irritated that she was kind of tricked into this conversation. And then, so she said her dissenting opinion, and then walked away. And Liz and I both heard this conversation, and both just started like giggling, laughing to ourselves. And this lady then noticed, and we had a little conversation with her about it as well that was very funny. And so there's that happened in the morning. On our way home from the farmer's market, we were driving up this Hidden Springs, and it's a very steep hill going up to our house, and that hill regularly has people who are going 15, 20 miles an hour. It's a 25 mile an hour road. People are going real slow. Now, I've had lots of cars that can't handle that hill at normal speeds before, so I understand that part. But most of the time, there's people who have cars that can handle it just fine, not too turny, and they're just going real slow up this hill. It was a nice day yesterday, and we had our windows down. I noticed on the first turn that this man in front of us had the windows down, and I noticed he wasn't a student driver, which I have grace for. Student drivers having to figure out how to do that. I get that. My son's learning how to drive right now. It's very fun. He's doing a great job with it, too. I noticed he wasn't. There's other people I have grace for, right? Driving like that. It's like, the lady's on a Sunday drive and it's potentially her last drive, Like, I get it. Enjoy your drive. Enjoy that. Soak it up. This wasn't one of those people. And so I got really frustrated. And this has happened like 4 days in a row now. And I got really frustrated and I yelled out the side of the window and I said, "It's the one on the right." It's the pedal on the right. You push it. You can go ahead and go up the hill. It's the pedal on the right. Liz and the kids started laughing because it was pretty funny. But that's not me. That's not something I do. I don't yell out at people like that. I don't try to point out somebody's irritation to me. I don't do that. And that struck me as I had been studying this section as well. It struck me that there was something different about my expression towards someone else there. And then I remembered the lady interacting with the political conversation earlier in the morning, and I realized I've been reading a lot about the struggle in our society today, and I felt like the Lord brought that back to me, and the amount of irritation there is in that way, and the amount of opposition people have towards one another that's very heels dug in, very aggressive right now. And I realize there's something going on in my heart that is not the truth of what my heart is for people. There's something going on there where there's an irritation in me, something for me to look at, something for me to deal with. And I think that's what we're talking about here. It wasn't about my expression that was the issue. It wasn't that I was so bad for going out and saying something really funny to this guy who probably didn't even hear me. It was more for my family to laugh. That wasn't the issue. The issue was, where did that come from? It's not me. Why did that come out? It was looking at the heart of it. And this is what Jesus is saying here. Yes, you should tithe. Yes, you should do these other things. But let's look at the actual heart. Are you actually experiencing the love of God? Are you living in the love of God? Are you fighting for God's justice? Do you care about the actual important things, which is the heart, that Jesus is trying to come in and transform for us? They had these rules, this dirt, the decay, the things that defiled the body. And what Jesus is saying is that sin, or not define the body, that defile the body. And what Jesus is saying is sin defiles the heart. That's the issue. Let's look at the heart. Because the body being defiled meant that they couldn't go worship. The soul being defiled means there's a hardness with us, between us and God. There's a separation between us and him, a difficulty in being able to really worship, really interact, really experience all of who he is when it's a heart issue. So he's saying that sin, yes, that's what defiles the soul. And Jesus wants deeply intimacy, closeness, interaction with us, a real relationship. And so, as I had to deal with yesterday, the question here comes, where does my heart really need Jesus' healing? That's the question for all of us in this. Our actions should be an outpouring of our heart. And so wherefore does my heart need Jesus' healing? Secondly, he goes on, and he says, "What sorrow awaits you, Pharisees, for you love to sit in the seats of honor in the synagogues and receive respectful greetings as you walk in the marketplace. Yes, what sorrow awaits you, for you are like hidden graves in a field. People walk over them without knowing the corruption they are stepping on." This would have been a dagger to their hearts, that you are hidden graves in a field. But let's first go to the seats of honor in the synagogue. The seats of honor were the ones that if we had a bunch of chairs up here, the row of, let's say, the council or elders or respected people within the church, and we put them up here, and then they would all be dressed all fancy and nice and all just looking out at, and we were all looking at them. Those were the respectful places. They would be behind the person teaching. They would be seen and looked at and revered by the people. They were looked at as the holiest people. Then, when they were going out in the marketplace and going around town, people would respect them and give them greetings. And the more respectful and honoring those greetings were, the more they were favored in the life of the people. And they are trying to be looked at as examples of holiness here. And that was important to them. And yet, the truth of what's happening, that Jesus was pointing out, said, yet the truth is, your graves in an open field, hidden graves in an open field. This is one of the things that would defile you in the law. If you were to touch a grave, even unknowingly, if you were to walk over it, unknowingly touching a grave, then you couldn't worship for 7 days. You couldn't go to the temple for 7 days. And so Jesus is saying there's this open field. People are all walking across, and you are a hidden landmine of defileness. You are under there, and they're walking over you, making it so that they can't actually worship. They can't go to the temple for 7 days, making them unclean. And it's because of their corruption, because their hearts were corrupted. Kaylee, my daughter, recently I took her out to breakfast, and she told me, she was saying how she respects her mom and me in certain ways. And then how did she say this? And I was trying to, pastors' kids can have weird ideas of their parents, and I don't want that in any of our kids. And so I was let her know, we all have our issues that we deal with and all this stuff. This is coming out wrong. She wasn't like saying, Dad, you're great. That's not the conversation. But I was trying to, we all have our issues and all this stuff. And she looked at me, she said, oh no, I know you've got your issues. You're just so free with them. I'm like, what? Wait. And I took it as a wonderful compliment there. And then after I was thinking about it, I was thinking, how is that a wonderful compliment? She's telling me that I'm just free with my stuff, my issues that I'm just putting out there. Everybody knows what you deal with, Dad. Okay. But the reason I felt so honored in that is because I was raised with this section, not this section in particular, but what this section's talking about, as a foundation for how I was raised, a foundation for my faith. That it's not about the actions that we do, it's about the heart. It's about our heart that is really the thing. And so therefore, I don't do a lot of effort of trying to look like a holy person. I'm me. And I express it in different ways, in different situations, of course. But I'm me. And that has led to some pretty cool things in my ministry as well. Actually in every workplace I've ever had, there's been people that have come up to me and just shared their lives, the depth of sin in their lives. And it's an honor for me to be able to sit with people. I sat with a couple of people in these last couple of weeks that were just unloading this stuff that they're struggling with, things in their marriage, things with their kids, things all over the place. And I feel very honored in that people would entrust me with it and feel just God's acceptance and love in some way through me. I had a friend who would come to the parking lot at church, and he would bribe his friends with whiskey afterwards if they would come. And he always had bottles of whiskey in his trunk, and he'd say, hey, come to church with me, I'll bring whiskey, we'll have it in the trunk, we'll sit in the parking lot afterwards. And we've had, actually it's happened Never mind. Yes, I had a friend that did that. There's a friend that still kind of does that. Here at South Lake, 3 different seasons I remember. There would be groups of people over there or over there, out there, smoking before the service, before they came in. And then there would be people who would come to me and saying, Jeff, this dude's handing out whiskey in the parking lot. Jeff, these people are smoking outside. What is that communicating to the people coming in? And what I love about this is that Jesus is saying, everybody needs Jesus the same amount, and that's completely. What are you communicating to people is that we're not examples of perfection. We are examples of God's grace. Should you be drinking whiskey out in the parking lot after church? I don't know. The Bible doesn't say one way or the other about that. It talks about drunkenness, but not about that. So I don't know. That's not the point. The point is, what's your heart in that? Are you responding to the Lord in it? And everybody's at a different stage of their walk with God. Everybody's at a different stage of their discipleship of Him. And so therefore, I love that people would come here and think, I'm accepted no matter who I am, no matter what I've done, and I am going to be me and come learn about Jesus. We are not examples of God's grace. We are. We are not examples of perfection. We are examples of God's grace, and yet so many people look at Christians and think they're hypocrites. Because we've communicated to the world that we're examples of perfection. It's absolutely not true. Jesus was perfect. He's the only one. And He died so that we could be forgiven, and all of our imperfections are clean, or wiped away, forgiven. So now we are imperfect, and yet we get to come in and worship Him with everything that we are, because we are examples of His incredible grace. Therefore, we get to live a lifestyle of true worshiping Him with everything we are, not having to hold anything back. So is my lifestyle a lifestyle of true worship? Am I really bringing myself to the Lord and truly just seeking Him? Because we are examples of Jesus' grace. That's the point. We are examples of Jesus' grace. The question for us is my lifestyle a lifestyle of true worship? Thirdly, last 2 are quicker. Jesus eases religious burdens. What sorrow also awaits you experts in religious law? So this is after He went after the Pharisees, and the guy said, wait a minute, you insulted me. And He said, okay, let me turn to you. He said, what sorrow awaits you experts in religious law? And that exclamation point, I don't know if that's sarcasm or intensity with that one. It could go either way. You experts in religious law, or you experts in religious law. What sorrow also awaits you? For you crush people with unbearable religious demands, and you never lift a finger to ease the burden. Now, these teachers of religious law were the ones who kept the law of the elders, is what it was called. And they would go and edit it. They were the ones, we'll talk about keys in the next point, they were the ones who had the key to the door that would go in, and they would look at the law, they would interpret it, and then change things to make sure everybody was being holy and earning their salvation. Did you ever see the movie Rounders? I'm not going to show the clip. It's one of my favorite movies. But Rounders is a guy who's a really incredible poker player, and yet he's going to school to be a lawyer and doing really well with that as well. And he meets with his professor because he's struggling, and poker's coming back into his life, and he doesn't know who he is. So he's going to his professor, and they sit down, and the professor tells him a story of his life where he was raised Jewish, and at the age of 13, he was told that he had a 40-year-old knowledge, and I don't remember the name of the book, the Meshiva. He had a 40-year-old knowledge of that book. And that's what we're talking about here, is the law of the elders. There's the law of the elders, and then there's the interpretation of the law that the religious leaders would write. And he had a 40-year-old understanding of that. And then he said, but by the age of 14, I knew I had to leave. And he said, why? You couldn't lie to yourself? He said, no, because I never saw God there. I never saw God in it. And that's what these religious burdens do to us, is we cloud our ability to really see God. And yes, there's things that we should do, there's actions to take, but it's not because of earning our salvation, it's because it's an outpouring of our heart. But when the law is causing us to not be able to see God, that's an issue. These people took what God said and then added all of these different rules. In the original law, he said, you can't murder, and they would add all of these different things to it. That's where the hand washing came from. That's where all the tithing rules, it can be on this, but it doesn't have to be on that. All of these different rules. But originally it was about the heart. It was the tithing one saying, yes, God's given me everything that I have. My whole life is about God's grace, and so I'm going to give him, out of my love, the first 10% of that. And yet they took it to a thing that was a burden, and they didn't ever help anybody in it. And that's an issue for us if we are losing sight of what's really going on in our hearts. And when we try to earn the love of God, we can't ever do it. It's going to be a burden that we will always fail in. Because we can't be good enough. We can only be in love enough, as our pastor always says. Can't be good enough. We can only be in love enough. So it's that being in love with Jesus, not being good enough for Jesus. Because none of us are. None of us are. The question here for us is, am I trying to earn Jesus' love? Fourth thing Jesus threw out there, we are all commissioned to show the truth. That's the truth of this section. Let's read this. What sorrow awaits you experts in religious law, for you remove the key to knowledge from the people. You don't enter the kingdom yourselves, and you prevent others from entering it. What this is saying is they had the key to knowledge. Here was the book. They were the ones who would go in. They would interpret it. They would tell the people what it means and what we have to do. And that knowledge is what helped people to experience the Lord, to experience the kingdom for themselves. And Jesus is saying, no. What you guys are doing is actually hurting people from being able to enter. You've removed the key to knowledge because you've added all of these other things to it. And the point of your life is to help others to enter into the kingdom of God. There's two truths in this that we need to look at. The first truth is that we are called to help people enter or experience the kingdom of God. We are all called to do that. Jesus, the Great Commission, said, go make disciples of all the nations. Go and show people the gospel. Go and show people who Jesus is. Go and show people Jesus' love. That was the commission that Jesus gave to us, and that's what these people were supposed to be doing too, but the rules got in the way because their heart wasn't there. And so this is true for us. How do we define ourselves? We should be defining ourselves. If we've experienced the love of Jesus, we define ourselves as a child of God, right? Therefore, how does our life actually show that to other people? The question here is, how are you helping others respond to Jesus in your life? We're all commissioned to do it, but if we actually look and say, how am I doing this? It's a harder question. For me, there have been seasons of my life where I've realized this aspect of my life I rely too much on my job for. Yes, it's easy for me to say, I'm helping other people to see Jesus because, look, I'm talking to you, telling you to see Jesus, right? But how am I doing it just in my natural life? And I've had to really sit and look at myself with that. There's 3 in particular seasons of my life that I've been struck at evaluating that for me. And that's true for all of us, though. Because if we're a child of God, that means we are always. We're a child of God with our family. We're a child of God at work. We're a child of God at church. We're a child of God when we go watch the Cowboys at the sports bar. We're a child of God all the time. I'm a child of God when I'm following somebody who doesn't know how to drive, right? Always. Therefore, I'm an example of him, always. People are saying, oh, look, there's one of those Christians yelling at me because my car doesn't work. We're a child of God all the time. And we've been commissioned. We are responsible for being that example out in the world, which we shouldn't take as a pressure. We should take that as an incredible gift. Jesus came, and his plan was to use us. That might seem like a silly plan at some level. And if we were examples of perfection, it would be a terrible plan. But we're not. We are examples of the unbelievable depth of the grace of God. And therefore, we get to show that to the world. My favorite times are when I get to sit with people and really talk about life. And it's one of the greatest, I don't know the right word there, one of the greatest honors of my life, to be able to sit with people and have them open up to me. And it's not because of being a pastor or anything, it's just in life in general. But be able to actually deal with the truth of life. When I see somebody who has a different experience than I do, I want to go hear their story. I want to go show them that they're loved, they're accepted, just for who they are. There's one time it was incredibly difficult for me to sit with a man and talk about life, talk about the issues of life. One time because his issues were unrepentant and so against what I believe is healthy. But other than that, I know some weird stuff about a lot of people. Some of them in the room. And when I get to be friends with these people, and my friends a lot of times don't get along because they're so different and have such different values. And yet I don't have to do that. I get to just appreciate them for who they are in Jesus. That's it. But I have a responsibility in that to really show people who God is. And that's not me, Jeff, as a pastor. That's me, Jeff, as a child of God. And now I'm responsible for what do I do with that? I have to be intentional with this. I can't just let this person just feel loved. What do I do with that? How am I actually helping them to respond to Jesus? Not just be okay with who they are. You get what I mean there? We should all be okay with who we are, but also seeking Jesus, growing in him. So how am I being intentional about that? And how am I actually defining myself as a child of God all the time? Looking at the things that are in my heart, making sure I'm receiving Jesus' healing for that. Is my lifestyle a lifestyle of actual worship? Am I trying to earn Jesus' love at all, or am I just really receiving his grace, his love, his forgiveness? It's only through me being there that I'm able to actually lead other people there too. Well, more effectively lead people there. Because all of these sections that we looked at, it was hard for me to word these points because there's so much that's about other people in it. He was saying, Pharisees, here's what you are, and here's what you're doing to the people. The religious leaders, here's what you are, and here's what you're doing to the people. Here's what you are, and here's what you're doing to the people. The focus first is our own heart, but then there's the commission that he's given us to go out and share that love. And there's over and over in the Bible where it's not going to be easy to do that. We are going to be looked at oddly or angrily in certain situations. And yet, how can we not want other people to know the incredible love that we've experienced? We're accepted by Jesus for exactly how we sit here today. And everybody can feel the freedom of that. If we're truly experiencing God's grace, there is an unbelievable peace and freedom in that, because we know it's Him who's transforming our hearts, not us. We don't have to strive for anything. We just have to be seeking Him and moving forward intentionally with Him, because we want to express our love more and more. We want to experience and express His grace more and more in this world, and we are the ones He's chosen to express that to the world. Therefore, if we're clouded in our view of Jesus, here's some things for us to look at. Here's some questions to answer. But Jesus died on the cross. In fact, let's grab our communion cups. Jesus died on the cross for that terrible driver in front of me. He died on the cross for the dad who doesn't know how to prepare his kids before he gets to school. He died on the cross for the boy that broke my little girl's heart. He died on the cross for the person sitting next to me at work. Most importantly, He died on the cross for you. Most importantly, He died on the cross for me. And why? Because He wants relationship with us. I don't think there's anybody here in the room that thinks they deserve that. I don't think there's anybody in the room that thinks what Jesus did for me is warranted. Like, yeah, that was about right. And everyone in the world is in the same place. I asked a bunch of people this week, who do you associate with most in the Bible? And I'm going to get to that in in later sermons, but not one person said Jesus. Well, Andy did jokingly, but not one person said, you know what, I'm most like Jesus in the Bible. We all know who we are. We all know who Jesus is. And we all know that there's nothing we've done to earn His love, and yet we get it fully. And in return, we get to let that soak in and transform our hearts and just live it out freely. Live out who God is transforming us into. Live out who God is letting us be. Without pressure, without religious laws to get in the way, but just the truth of who Jesus is within us. We get to live in that freedom and peace. So Jesus, let's take the bread first. Represents Jesus' body, broken for our wholeness, broken for our healing. Let's take a second and just say, Lord, is there an element of this where I need my heart to be healed? Let's ask Him for that healing. Let's receive that healing. Jesus, thank you for your incredible sacrifice. That you fight for our grace, for us to experience grace. Jesus, you have the power to heal us, even at a heart level. And we come to you today, Lord, knowing we're imperfect. It's hard to receive the fact that that's okay with you, and you know that. You still love us, but we come to you asking for us to be able to receive your healing, to receive the wholeness that this bread represents. Thank you for dying for us to give us exactly that. Let's eat the bread. Just take the juice or water or whatever you might have at home. Jesus, we know this represents your blood poured out for our forgiveness. Lord, everything there is within us that is good, we know is from you. Help us to live a life of generosity that gives that back. It gives that back to the world. But Lord, the only way we can do that is because you've forgiven us. You've redeemed us. The world has clouded and defiled the beautiful creation you've created in each and every person here. But this blood is the only thing powerful enough to really wash that away. And your sacrifice did just that. Thank you for allowing us, because of your forgiveness, to be able to live in freedom in you. Looked at as clean and able to live a lifestyle of worship partnered with your Holy Spirit as we walk through every area of our life. Thank you for your blood, Lord. Amen. Now let's worship. Let's stand and worship him together.